Deep in the Arctic Ocean, there's something alive that is old. Older than modern nations. Older than the steam engine. Older than Darwin. Older than Newton. Older than The Simpsons. Now, before we get into the whole extending human life thing, because I can already hear Silicon Valley executives heavy breathing at the thought of turning living beyond 45 into a subscription model, we need to get into the whole how weird is this animal thing? The Greenland shark is one of the largest predatory sharks, one of the largest fish on Earth. It can grow up to 6 or even 7 meters long, and well, way over a ton. Size-wise, they're actually comparable to a great white shark, so much like the one in Jaws, they should be this apex predator, right? In reality, the Greenland shark swims at a rate of about 0.7 miles per hour, while the great white can swim at about 25 miles per hour. So while the great white shark is burning rubber and collecting speeding tickets like an Uber driver with an ice cream cake, the Greenland shark moves more like me before 10 AM every morning. Its scientific name is Somniosus microcephalus, which, if you came here via the Instagram video of mine, which got a bit of attention, you will know already what that means. Cause somniosus means sleepy, or drowsy, or tired. Microcephalus means little head. So, the Greenland shark, it's a little sleepyhead. It's just a little sleepyhead. And when I found that out, I cried. I fully cried. It was one of the cutest names I've ever heard, and I cried.
I'm in a glass case of emotion!
The reason that it moves so slowly is because it is perfectly designed for life in the vast, deep cold of the deep Arctic Ocean. Its metabolism is extremely slow, even by Arctic standards. Its growth is frankly glacial. It grows at a rate of about 0.5 centimeters to 1 centimeter every single year. So that means if you see a Greenland shark that's about 5 meters long today, it probably started growing before the French Revolution. We think currently that Greenland sharks hit sexual maturity when they get to about 4 meters long, and at their normal rate of growth, that means a Greenland shark won't start secretly googling shark, naked, sexy until about 150 years old. Imagine being a teenager for over a century. No, imagine being a parent to a teenager for over a century. And that brings us to the fact about the Greenland shark, which is probably the most famous and the one I'm sure you've heard if you know anything about the Greenland shark. It's that in these stories, which have been consistently run since about 2016 when scientists made this discovery, the Greenland shark is thought to live up to about 400 years old. Now that's incredible, that is truly spectacular. But I did some digging. The truth might be even crazier.
You can't handle the truth!
The scientists, what they did is they did radiocarbon dating on the proteins of the Greenland shark's eyes. We'll get into why that's cool later on. What they found out is they got an age range, and the age range that they got was somewhere between 272 and 512 years old. The middle of that being then about 400. So it was just a simple case of all these outlets saw the middle and went, cool, we'll just run with that. We'll just run with they can live up to 400 years old. But of course that does mean that there is that upper limit, 512 years old. So in theory there's a chance they can live up to 500 years old. And then I had a thought. You see, I looked at, the methodology of this paper. Effectively, there were a bunch of sharks that were caught via bycatch. They were accidentally caught in fishing nets, things like that, and donated to science. Okay, great. Except, here's the thing that no one seems to have considered. None of these sharks died from old age.
Over there. I'm 37. What? I'm 37, I'm not old!
They didn't raid the old folks' home for the Greenland sharks. They found vibrant ones that were swimming about. These were adult, mature, normal-aged Greenland sharks. And the biggest one they caught was about 5 to 5.5 meters long. And as I said earlier, there are records. We've seen Greenland sharks up to 6 meters long, and there are stories from Inuit indigenous fishermen going back a very long time of sharks up to 7 meters long. If we apply that growth rate, 0.5 to 1 centimeter a year growth, that means we could easily take what we have studied, the aging of the proteins up to 512 years, call it 400 years, we could be adding 100, 200 more years onto that. That means we could genuinely have sharks that are alive today which are 700, 800 years old. That is mind-blowing. Imagine that, 800 years old. Imagine a shark being born, what's that, the 1220s? What was going on in the 1200s? Okay, what's the Magna Carta? That was the year that was the year that they issued the definitive version of the goddamn Magna Carta. But how does this happen? How is it possible? How is it possible an animal can live this long? There is a reason things die of old age. There is a biological imperative, a reason things die. How does it not break?
Why won't you dive?
So a big part of the reason is temperature. Cold environments means cold chemistry, means that heat energy is much less, barely present at all. Cells have less energy, that means there's less cell replication, that means there's less chance of mutations and diseases. So they live in water that's around about 1 to 12 degrees Celsius, and they can dive down as deep as 2,200 meters as well. These are a deep diving shot. And I said about the swimming, they swim at about 0.7 miles per hour, and a big part of that is because they don't really have to think about the swimming that much. They have massive livers. It's crazy. They have massive livers full of oil. The oil was later hunted by humans, and you can still buy it today. But their livers can weigh up to a third of their entire body weight, and that liver oil has a neutral buoyancy. So it basically means that it just sort of keeps them at whatever depth they're at. But it's not all about the cold, though. After all, if the secret to a long life was just being cold, we'd have Scottish people who keep calling themselves Pictish and warning about Romans down south.
I'm sure I can handle myself if I come across a primitive Highland Pict.
See, when we eventually decoded the Greenland shark's genome, we found something just spectacular. So, humans have something like 3.2, 3.3 billion base pairs in their DNA. Great, that's a nice amount. That's a perfectly respectable amount. That's the kind of base pairs. You take that amount of base pairs home to meet the family, and your dad's like, yeah, firm handshake, nice eye contact, that's respectable. But Greenland sharks. 6.5 billion base pairs in their DNA. 6.5 billion. A huge amount of this DNA, most of it, is especially designed for self-repair. So the DNA of the Greenland shark, it's just this constant self-repairing machine. And more than that, it's also organ self-repair. And this is frankly just what we know so far. So I mentioned that study from 2016 about the aging. That's kicked off a real wave of research into the Greenland shark. So it's really been the last 10 years that we've started actually unpicking the mystery, the puzzle that is the Greenland shark, but we still know barely anything about them. If you've ever seen a photo of a Greenland shark, you might have noticed a particularly weird thing. A worm, or something like a worm, coming out of its eye. See, 90% of Greenland sharks have a parasite in their eyes. That parasite is a copepod called Omatacoita elongata. It's directly attached to the cornea of the eye, and it feeds on the eye tissue. And because of this, scientists very fairly assumed for decades and decades that they were basically blind. After all, how on earth is it possible that a Greenland shark can have decent vision when, well, it has effectively a giant lamprey sort of stuck in its eye, just eating its eye. After all, if you had a literal worm dangling from your eyes, you'd probably go see a doctor to have it removed. Well, I mean, not after doing a really killer Halloween costume as Medusa, of course. All this sounds pretty catastrophic, but it really isn't. There's an extensive study of shark retinas, and we found that was a big part of measuring this aging process, is finding out that their eyes self-repair. The proteins in their eyes don't age. Simply, the proteins in their eyes don't age. I don't know what age they settle. Maybe it's like that from born. Maybe it's like that after 50 years, whenever they stop being a child. But anyway, at a certain point, their eyes just stay the same. The proteins don't age, and that's how we're able to carbon date those proteins and get an idea of how old they've been around. And within all this study, we found that despite the parasites, despite the harsh Arctic conditions, despite living 2,000 meters below the surface, the retinas appear structurally pristine. Not just fine, not just good for their age, pristine. Now, of course, we're not talking about they've got 20/20 vision, they've not got Superman X-ray heat vision. They are designed to work in their environment, in the deep sea. They see in black and white because their eyes contain really mostly rod cells and no cone cells, meaning that they are designed to see in very low light conditions. There's actually speculation as well that this copepod, that it's not quite a parasitic relationship, that it could have a mutualistic benefit, which is in other words, they help each other. And that's because apparently there's a theory these copepods faintly glow, and it's like an anglerfish. That these copepods are faintly glowing, attracting fish going, oh, there's just a worm swimming about there. And it turns out to be a Greenland shark, and the Greenland shark can just snap up a fish that comes to eat its best friend who's a worm living in its eye. So what does this slow, sleepy, very cold shark actually eat? Here's where things get kind of confusing. There's some things you would expect. So we've examined the stomachs of Greenland sharks that have been caught by bycatch, mostly fish, as you'd expect. I think we're talking 60-70% of the stomach contents is largely fish. There's squid. Okay, I can accept squid. They found bits of other Greenland sharks, so... okay, disturbing. Cannibalism isn't off the menu for them, apparently.
I hear they're cannibals.
I should have taken my chances with the cannibals.
They're cannibals.
Reindeer, for some reason. Only thing I can think is that Santa, you know how Bond villains have like a shark pit? Santa has the same thing, but for Greenland sharks. Seals. Seals. Big ass seals. Harp seals, bearded seals, hooded seals. And, my biggest heartbreak. They found polar bear. They found polar bear in their stomachs. No, I trusted you. You were the sleepy one. I'm sure they're just a scavenger. But then that brings to the fish remark. See, fish never stop. You know, mammals, they do a lot of just stopping. Fish barely stop. You know, they really just kind of keep moving. They might slow down a little bit, drift with the current, but they're pretty active. How does a Greenland shark swimming 0.7 miles an hour catch a fish? This is another just insane fact. The mouth of the Greenland shark has the ability to effectively generate a vacuum and suck in from 30-35 centimeters away, from a foot. That's a foot away. They can, anything that's a foot away, they can suck it down. And that brings us finally, when it comes to eating, probably the most disturbing piece of news. This is the point where I should advise, probably put the children to bed. Probably get your blanket, get your hot chocolate, get the episode of Paw Patrol ready on our second screen, okay? This is about to get disturbing. The year is 1859. We go to Pond Inlet in Canada. And I tell you what, the best thing to do is I will directly quote the French missionary who wrote about this unfortunate incident. A shark was caught at Pond Inlet, in whose stomach they found a human leg. It is even said that the leg was still encased in a sealskin boot tied above the calf. And you think this is an isolated case? You think one Greenland shark stumbled across a human? No. 1818. Western Norway. The small island of Runde. 4 fishermen disappear in a violent storm. And a few weeks later, a Greenland shark is caught by another fisherman. In the shark's stomach, they found, this is again quoting, 2 barrels of liver oil and a man in his full sea equipment, such as fur clothes and sea boots, but without a hat. The man, still recognisable, was quickly identified as one of the missing fishermen from Runta. I consider it a bit rude that they listed the liver oil, by the way, in the telling of what they found in the stomach. First things first, hey, 2 barrels of liver oil, hey. Instead of, oh, we found a human in there. It would like a news report on a devastating house fire, reading something like, lost in the tragic fire were 6 cans of Foster's, a cracked mirror, the charging cable for a 2007 Nokia, and a family of 4. Now, I'm not saying that Jaws got it all wrong, and the real danger in the deep is actually an 800-year-old living vacuum with worms hanging out of its eyes. I'm just saying that Lovecraft had a point.